of what the Changing Life Through Horses program does and what its aim is? And
yeah, absolutely. So it's about offering a different opportunity for young people that do not learn well in that classroom of 30 with a teacher stood at the front.
Not natural for us to be inside. We need to be outside and need to be in the sun, albeit mainly rain in the UK. Schools that are listening, like, how complicated is it? You know, could it be a riding school that has 4 staff in it?
We've got very small centres with 3 or 4 ponies in remote areas of Scotland that do an absolutely incredible job.
There are a lot of schools out there that still see it as something nice to go and do. And it is something nice to do, absolutely. But it's an education programme and it's absolutely contributing to that young person's real life chances in the future.
Alison, Philippa, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself, tell our viewers about what you do, who you are, your background?
So my name's Alison. I'm head of our Changing Lives Through Horses programme at the British Horse Society. I've been in this role for about 4 years now. I've come from a teaching background, so I'm a teacher by trade, but I've also worked in local authorities, in special needs teams, so I've got a really good understanding of that sector. And I've always ridden. So when I saw this job advertised 4 years ago, it was a case of horses and disadvantaged kids. Well, that's my dream job. Oh my God. And was thrilled to get it. And it's been an absolutely amazing 4 years working and developing the programme.
Amazing. Philippa?
Yeah. So I'm Philippa and I'm the programme manager for Changing Lives for the North. So my role is split north and south because of the growth of the programme. I'm from a very horsey family, always had horses. So moving into horses was very much a natural career progression for me. And I've worked in riding schools, so I've coached everybody from beginner, I've taught RDA and apprenticeships. And then when I saw this job advertised for the BHS, I just thought it was a really good opportunity to kind of enhance my skill set really and move away from just being on the yard to trying to be a bit more of an organised person.
Well, if you're anything like my wife, I'm very organised. I can't even muck. I'm not allowed to muck out. It has to be her way to muck out or nothing else. I'm not allowed to help. That was it. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. So we did a podcast with BHS before, and they mentioned about the Changing Life Through Horses program, which is what you are both here to talk about now. So could you give us a bit of a background of what the Changing Life Through Horses program does and what its aim is and its background, how it came about? Any information is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So the British Horse Changing Lives Through Horses programme has been around since 2016. It was originally designed to work with young people that might have quite complex issues as a way of re-engaging them with society, with education, with employment through coming into spending some time at a BHS approved riding school. When I was appointed back in 2021, there was a definite intention to expand the programme to be more of an education and alternative provision programme. And that's really what we've spent the last 4 years doing. So our cohort now is extremely broad. It ranges from young people that might have quite mild social, emotional, mental health needs through to complex ones. But it is essentially an equine facilitated alternative provision programme. It works in our BHS approved riding schools with our trained coaches. And it's about welcoming young people that may have had no experience with horses before into an educational pathway where they can learn about horse care, learn about riding, but also it brings in a range of cross-curricular activities as well. So all of the equine activities are linked to the national curriculum across all 4 nations, because we're across all 4 nations as well. So the children, it's almost learning by stealth, I think, sometimes, that whether they are counting the number of coloured ponies or the number of bay ponies, and then they're doing a tally chart, and then they're working out some percentages, and before you know it, you've got an entire maths lesson there. Wow. So it's very much a way of engaging young people with learning that where traditional school may not be working for them.
Traditional school for me was just an absolute nightmare. If there was something like this around when I was a kid, I mean, I probably wouldn't have gotten in because I was a bit too thick anyway.
Everybody, we get asked a lot about what's the criteria, and really apart from an age criteria, so we do have kind of a 5 to 25, band of young people.
Up to 25?
Yeah,
Oh,
because
wow.
that fits in with educational healthcare plans. So if a young person with special needs, the local authority will maintain a educational healthcare plan up to 25. So we do work with young adults. So it's around employability as well and transition to adulthood that can be really difficult. So yeah, it does an awful lot. But we have, other than that, we have no criteria other than a young person that would benefit from that provision. And we have 6 key life skills. Do you want to talk about the key life skills?
Yeah, so we've got the 6 key life skills are aimed at personal development. So, we're looking at how we can increase communication, young person's confidence. And I think horses are really good at that. Thinking about that perseverance, teamwork. I think, when they come, it might be that in school that they found that teamwork's very difficult. They don't want to perhaps work with somebody else, whereas actually when they come to the yard and they've got heavy water buckets that they need to lift to benefit the horse, it's really easy for them to start to work alongside other people. Which one?
Yeah, so everything we do, whether they're doing a horse care session, a ridden session, whether they're doing some classroom-based work, everything is fed through those 6 key skills, and they are transferable skills. So whether that young person is still in a school placement, whether they're going on to college, whether they're going on to employment opportunities, being able to communicate, understand what responsibility is, being able to work as part of a team, all of those skills are so important. And the fact that we can work with horses and our riding schools to be able to deliver those skills to young people that have really struggled with that kind of emotional connection elsewhere is an absolutely fantastic thing to do.
No, I totally agree. It's I mean, the school system now, again, my kids are going through it already, but it's the same when I was 30 years ago, whatever it is. These sort of programs, if I had the option to go on these sort of things, I know people even mainly take people with difficulties, or if they're open to it, but I feel as though the education system needs a bit of this sort of thing, because especially in the equestrian world with my kids, I found that they can only learn what they're learning in the horse world at all.
No, and I think it's not so much about the content, it's more the way of working. So when we talk to young people that are coming to the programme, which is the best bit of the job when we get out and about and meet the young people, because that's why we're kind of both in it, I think. But they absolutely unequivocally talk to us about belonging and safety and acceptance. And for many young people, they don't get those things in school at the moment. And it's no fault of the school. No. Because, I've been a senior leader in a big mainstream secondary school. It's really hard to put bespoke pathways in place for 2,000 young people at a mainstream secondary school. But what I think is really important, based on what you've just said, is that kind of continuum of provision. I think I've spoken about a continuum of education provision for 30 odd years. And schools that get it right will work really well, and they're able to kind of have a range of offers for their young people. And Changing Lives Through Horses as an alternative provision programme is about offering a different opportunity for young people that do not learn well in that classroom of 30 with a teacher stood at the front. We can be more bespoke. We can be more planned. Riding schools have got loads of space. So, if something's not going well, they can go out for a walk to the fields. They can do something different.
I love that.
They don't have to turn to page 20 and do questions 1 to 10 because some young people just can't manage that. And then if we start talking about children that have experienced trauma, or young people that might be neurodiverse, we've seen a big increase in those young people that are presenting with those challenges. It's just about offering them an education pathway that just does it differently, and it works. We've got so many testimonials from young people.
This sort of thing has come out because of there's been an increase of like children who are really struggling in schools, or do you think it's always sort of been there, now someone's gone, this would be a really good idea to do? Or do you think there's been quite a large increase over the past few years?
I'm not necessarily sure there's been an increase in need. I think there's different pathways where needs can be recognised. What we are aware of that has been significantly different from the pandemic is the rates of absence in school, which is huge. So I think the Education Secretary yesterday has said that in this current academic year, over a third of children have been absent for part of that school year.
Really?
We know that on figures based on last year, the rates of severe absence, where children are out of school for 50% of their school week, have increased to 167% since the pandemic. So there are a lot of children that are not in school that may have additional needs, but may not.
Yeah.
So I think there's been a lot of talk about attitudes changing towards school. And I think the one last week was it's all because parents are working at home now, so that they're not setting a good example to their children to go to school.
Right. Okay.
But again, for us, it's about recognising that children that are particularly anxious about that school environment, they're able to come to a programme like Changing Lives Through Horses that gives them a different opportunity of doing that.
Yeah. I didn't realise it was that high. That's mad.
It's huge. There are a lot of children not in school at the minute for a whole variety of reasons.
I was going to say, and there's not one pinpoint reason for, obviously not, but why? I wonder why it's increased so much since the pandemic. Do you think there's been more reportings on it or more data available, or do you think it's actually genuinely just shot up?
There has been a shift in attitude. I think for some children and families, from a positive point of view, the pandemic showed them that actually children could still thrive and not go to school. So for families, if you've got a child who's struggling in that school system, and all of a sudden they didn't have to go to that school system, and that child still thrived on that kind of online learning, they saw a different route. Whereas clearly for many children, including my son at the time who was doing A-levels, it was terrible. You know, he missed his friends, he missed school. It was a real challenge to him not to have that structure in place. But for children, particularly with special needs, I think parents and the children suddenly realised, actually, school isn't where I need to be, and it's not the be all and end all. So to get those children back into school has been challenging even 4 years later.
Wow. But no, you are right. When we were homeschooling, obviously during the pandemic, it was very, very difficult. And the kids, they did it, they learned. But then I think, you said the belonging, the social aspect, they were missing that. But clearly this program, which I know we haven't even touched on yet.
Some young people find that socialising very difficult, don't they? So for some, actually, the lack of socialising for them has just put them in a bedroom.
Yeah.
So for some of our centres, they're dealing with young people that have been in their bedroom for weeks, months, years.
Really?
And actually the only thing that's getting them out of their bedroom is the fact they've got Changing Lives to look forward to.
Really?
So, that's a real positive, isn't it, for them to try and get them out of that hole. And
100%. Well, loneliness.
It can break that cycle.
Yeah. Well, loneliness, that sort of thing, is on the rise massively across the whole world because of screens, because of all the generative AI, everything that I could have a conversation with a chatbot and it seemed like a real person. A lot of people are doing this sort of thing now, like, because it's easier to go and speak to an AI or a chatbot than it is to a human. But then again, with horses, I know my wife certainly prefers the horses over me.
Yeah, we've got so many examples of young people that might come at the start of a program and may find it really difficult to talk to other adults or other young people. But then the coach will find them chatting away in the stable to one of the ponies, because they feel that, they're not being judged by the horses, that the horses don't care what they wear, what they say, what they look like. So it's a great leveler, I think, far more than in school, when you've got quite a hierarchical relationship in schools. So with sort of uniforms and teachers having a certain sense of authority, they come into the program. It's a completely different relationship that they have with the adults.
I think as well, again, if you've got something to aim towards or talk about as well, like I struggled when I was a kid, and I'm sure a lot of people did. It's like, what do you talk about with other people? Because there's not much going on. But then if you've got like a shared aim, i.e. the horses or whatever other animal, it gives you something to talk about, doesn't it? And probably gives you those skills that you were explaining before to then go and cross that over into other industries.
Yeah, absolutely. And And we have that, don't we? I mean, we've had young people that have gone on to have apprenticeships that we've worked
really
with.
positive, working in the industry now.
Yeah.
I think it was actually at Carrington, we had
Oh, yeah.
a young boy that he actually wasn't that fussed on horses, but liked the plaiting up, and he went on to be a hairdresser.
Really?
I'm sure it was your mum sent to you.
Ah.
So we've had young people now that are starting to move through our professional pathway that's internationally recognised, within our industry, that perhaps before they had a real barrier to learning. And the horses I've got them over that barrier, and actually they're going to the centres and they found that their brains are like sponges and they're taking in all that information because it's actually somewhere that they want to be. The horses are, something that they want to work towards. And perhaps before they've never really been shown or been around positive relationships. So when they come in, they're starting off with positive relationships. They might just be with the horse, but that's transferring into, working with others, starting and, working through being an apprentice, which will then hopefully, help our industry staffing issues. We've got young people now that are working in the riding schools. They're training to be coaches or grooms. And if people look at our career pathways, it's not just a one pathway that's just going to take them to be a coach. They can go off and, be a groom if that's what their passion is. Lots of people don't want to ride, but they just love that interaction with horses on the ground. And we have a career pathway for that.
Love it.
For those young people.
I think it's finding that purpose, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think some young people who don't engage with more traditional education really don't see the purpose of that learning environment, but coming into something that is practical, that has got a definite pathway through of engagement and achievement, that they can then see that there's something at the end of it for them. It's just that sense of purpose, I think, for me.
Yeah. Do you think also there's a touch of it? It's like certain subjects in school, like I hated maths, but I love science because there was like the physics, all the experiments, and I love that. Do you think there's an element of that in, is like these kids just don't want to be sat behind a school, like you said, in front of a teacher, and because they're literally outside, they can take a walk, they can go plait up a horse, they can go groom a horse, they can go ride. That's really getting them excited, and then that's feeding into, like you said, the mathematics and and everything else.
I think the environment just plays a massive part. I think when any of us go to the yard, if you're thinking about your senses, are you going there just to look at horses? Are you going there, to touch them? Is it the smell? If you think about all of your senses, and that's very different to what you're getting in a school.
Agree.
And is that actually starting to change the way we think? Is that changing the way that they think? They've got all that outdoor space. They can take themselves off for 5 minutes of quiet, and that's part of, when we've got centres that wanting to offer the programme, is we insist that they have a space that a chill out zone, so those young people can just go and take 5 minutes and cool off, regulate themselves, have a cup of tea, have a biscuit, just to have a bit of space away from people. And that's, part of it, isn't it? Whereas in school, if you think, when Alison was saying there's 2,000 kids in the school, how do they get any headspace in that environment?
It is. I mean, part of what I've done over the years I've been in education is to do behaviour support work. That's working with young people that might be at risk of permanent exclusion, and working with the school to find ways to support those young people in school. And, I remember once working with a lad who I used to see at the end of the school day to review how his day has went. And he used to tell me that for him, his school day felt like he'd been in one of those like pinball machines, that he'd been the ball in the ping pong machine, because from walking into school at 8:30 in the morning till 3:00 in the afternoon, he felt that he'd just been bounced around, and he genuinely couldn't really tell me what he'd done during the day, because he'd been in survival mode, because that's what he needed to do to get through the school day. And there are so many children that are like that. And like Philippa said, what the programme does in the environment that we're able to offer is absolutely give space to those children. And it's also, I think, for me, when you talk to children, particularly children that may have had trauma in the background, or might have been a looked after child, they always talk about the idea that they don't feel seen and don't feel heard. And again, that's something that we talk to our coaches about in the initial training for Changing Lives Through Horses. So, we do that training. We do work with our coaches around special educational needs, knowledge, and we talk all the time about making sure those children are seen and heard, because then they're going to engage back with you. And if they're feeling invisible in school, you're
Yeah.
not going to be able to engage with that young person.
I think it is amazing. Just going back to your point about them being outside as well, I don't think it's natural. It's not natural for us to be inside. We need to be outside and need to be in the sun, albeit mainly rain in the UK. But
In the
that's
north.
okay. It's still, in the
It's
north.
sunny
Yeah.
in the north
It's
this
good.
week.
It's good. It makes you grow quicker.
Yeah.
No, but I think there is something behind that. I think there is. I'm very much the type of guy that's. I'd much prefer to be outside than stuck in an office all day, even though I am most of the time because I've got stuff to do. But when you go out for a walk, or even if we've just been away, been outdoors for about a week, come back, you feel refreshed, you feel lighter, and more prepared to learn. Obviously, in some of these kids' cases as well, which is it's great. So the children that usually come to these programs, the Change Life Through Horses program, what sort of backgrounds do they usually come from?
So hugely varied. So at the moment, we've talked about how much the programme has grown over the last few years. As of now, so we are just after February half term, so halfway through the school year. We've got just over 1,000 children registered on the programme actively at the moment across the UK. Wow. And we've had just almost 1,400 young people registered since September. So that has grown year on year around 40% over the last 3 years.
Are you seeing a drop, or is it increasing?
No, not at all.
Wow.
So
amazing.
Yes, it's a on growth, but then our centre numbers are increases as well. So we've got 143 centres, approved riding schools that are trained to deliver the programme across the UK again. So the trajectory is very much on the up. So you can imagine amongst those young people, there are a huge range of needs, from young people that may be in a mainstream school 4.5 days a week, and they come on half day a week to do some Changing Lives Through Horses sessions on that half day, right the way through to centres that have been running the programme for a while and may have specialised in young people with quite complex needs around neurodiversity or particular learning difficulties. We have young people that may have experienced trauma in their background, young people that may have come through the care system. We get some referrals from youth mentoring services. Wow. So, a really huge amount of a broadness of young people that come to the programme. But for whatever reason, they're young people that don't find those key skills come naturally to them, and they need support to develop those key skills. Yeah. And actually, if we can do it through equine facilitated learning, fantastic. Yeah. And we have young people that might come for 6 weeks. We have some young people that might be on the programme for 2 years.
Wow. So the children that you just said then that come from a different background, do you then have to, do the riding centres have to then change their curriculum or how they teach depending on the child's background or anything? Or is it just literally, it just one size fits all sort of thing? I
mean, no, not at all. So the programme is the programme. We have a set range of awards and pathways, but then within that, what the coach will do is set an individual bespoke pathway for either that small group of young people, if they're working with a group, or that individual. Right. So yes, it is absolutely tailored towards that young person's learning style. Yeah. So, and again, something that a mainstream school can't necessarily do very easily. Some schools are brilliant at doing lots of different things for children. But no, we can be very bespoke. So that the programme is there with those fixed awards, both in horse care and riding, and some additional skills as well. But the coach will pick a bespoke pathway through there. And I think what's really good on any particular day, if that's not going particularly well, then you can very easily switch tack, do a bit of distraction, go and do something else. You know, we're not going to make that successful today, so let's go and do something else that's successful. So when we train our coaches, we talk very much about a strength-based approach. So we're working on what the young people can do rather than working on what they can't do. So we're very much starting from where the young people are.
Sounds incredibly flexible. It's great.
Yeah. And I think you've talked about your coaching skills, haven't you? And it's made you reflect on your own coaching skills and how to adapt.
Yeah,
things.
and I think it's not real. It's not one size fits all. No. So when we're delivering training to our coaches, what I'll always say is actually that young person on Tuesday might come in and be fantastic. Yeah. The following Tuesday, they might have had a hectic weekend at home. You never know what they've been through over the weekend, what they've witnessed, what they've saw, who they've been meeting up with, what relationships they've had break down over the weekend. And on the following week when they come, they're a totally different person than what you saw the week before. So we always say about, meeting the needs of the individual on that day.
Ooh. So you must do quite a lot of training with the sites as well. That must be a huge undertaking.
Yeah, so that's a really big part of mine and Philippa and Emma, our other managers' job. So once a centre applies to do Changing Lives, so they have to be a BHS approved centre before they can deliver Changing Lives. And then we have developed a 5-session virtual training, because with the UK-wide programme, that has enabled us to kind of be really efficient in how we use our time. So on initial training, we might have a centre from the South Coast or from Northern Ireland or from Scotland. And it's really good that they can share and talk about their skills together as well. So the initial training is 5 sessions that we deliver across ourselves as a team. We do work with a couple of independent trainers as well that come in and deliver some sessions for us. But then it's really important in us that we continue to invest in those coaches in their team. So we run continued professional development around special educational needs. That's some things that I do because of my background working in SEN. We work with external providers to offer that, and the take up on that is brilliant. I mean, we did a neurodiverse, understanding what it is to be neurodiverse session before Christmas. We had 67 coaches on that session. So that kind of shows you the thirst from our brilliant BHS coaches to be fully committed to this. And obviously that's not just supporting them with Changing Lives, that's supporting with the 10 o'clock Saturday morning lesson. If they've got a range of people, it's not just about, okay, these are the skills I use to deliver Changing Lives. It's just the skills you deliver as a coach when you're working with a whole range of people.
Wow, such an amount of work that you guys put into it as well. So is with the instructors as well, is there like a bit of a sense of for the people that are on the program, is there like a community there? Do they talk to each other? Do they ask for advice? Is there a support?
We have
there
quite an active Facebook group that's just for our Change Lives with Horses coaches, and then we do hold, like we had a network meeting on Monday that was well attended. And actually that gave 3 of our centres the opportunity to share what they do. So that other centres can get, a bit of an idea of, oh, that's working there. But what we do say is what might work on the Wirral might not work up at Alma on the Shetland Isles.
Oh, really?
So if you think, it's just totally different working with the different local authorities and working with different people.
Yeah, but no, we do talk about it being a community. With the last 2 years, we've run an in-person conference for our coaches that we're able to offer through our kind of funding that we do. So that's a free CPD offer. So last year we were at Kiso in Bedfordshire, and I think we had about 70 people travel from as far up as Newcastle, Cornwall, made the effort to come and spend the day with us. And what they get, again, from chatting to each other, from listening to the speakers that we'd got coming in, we definitely see it as a community.
Wow. Have you, just as well, in your background, I'm just being nosy with it, have you seen like teachers come from a similar background to yourself, like worked in mainstream education and moved over to the equestrian side of it? Is there a lot of teachers that have done that?
So we've got a number of centres now, haven't we, that have employed teachers that have made the decision that actually Changing Lives is going to be a big part of our business plan.
Right.
So I can think of at least 5 centres that have now employed a teacher to come in and run their Changing Lives Through Horses programme. So they may still have sort of their equestrian coaches that deliver sessions, but they've also got teaching assistants and teachers that are working alongside them.
I wonder how they feel going from a mainstream school to a...
I think most of them also feel that they've fallen onto an absolute dream job.
Definitely.
Because it's obviously a very, very different experience.
Definitely, because this is it. It's all well and good getting the kids in there, but if you haven't got the team, the people to run and maintain that program, it'll collapse. But by the sounds of it, it sounds like a dream job if you're interested in horses or if you have any educational background.
It also really helps with those centres then talking to schools and their local authorities, because they're speaking the same language that the schools are speaking. So we get lots of inquiries from parents that have come across the programme on the website or may have read an article about it. and we give the parent the information and say, really need to now go to the school, because for
the riding school or the
their
mainstream
child's school,
Yeah, okay.
if the child's at school, because 3/4 of our young people are paid for by their school. So that is the way most young people are funded, as alternative provision. So we might then get the parent come back to us and go, yeah, I've spoken to school. And then the head teacher said, I'm not paying for your child to learn how to ride. And it's like, you've really completely missed the point. And that's then when we would get in contact with the school and we would share all of the information that we've got in terms of the fact that, no, this is not about teaching a child to ride. It is about a personal development program that's facilitated by horses and by very skilled professionals. And it's about positioning the program as that education offer, that children come out with real results, real impact, real difference. But, understandably, there are a lot of schools out there that still see it as something nice to go and do. And it is something nice to do, absolutely. But it's an education program, and it's absolutely contributing to that young person's real life chances in the future.
Yeah. Just because it's nice doesn't mean it's not education. I agree with you guys. Just because you're enjoying something doesn't mean you're not learning
it's about
anything from
getting
it.
the school's buy-in as well. And I think actually, if you've got a teacher at the school that's ridden or has been around horses, they very much get the benefits of being around horses. Definitely. So it is, we always say, if you've got a teacher at the school, you're kind of halfway there.
So just going back to that example that you gave me. So the parent sees the program online. They then get in contact with their mainstream school. The mainstream school either says yay or nay. And then the parent comes back to you, or?
No, so all the referrals are done directly to the riding schools.
Okay.
So we obviously facilitate all of the training, and we have an overview of our cohort. So any young person that's registered on the programme, we have an online platform where we record that young person being on the programme. That's how I can tell you that we've got 1,014 young people registered on the programme.
No, amazing.
But that's all done anonymously through GDPR. So the BHS, we don't have any of that sensitive information. All of that data sharing information is with the riding school. So yes, in order to get involved in the programme, you would go to your riding school that's delivering Changing Lives. But we as a team can point parents and schools in the direction of their nearest riding school if they want us to.
I'm only going on this because you mentioned it. In my school, we used to go for like swimming lessons. We used to go to a private company who used to provide us. But this company literally used to go around the schools and say, "Hey, we do this. Is that something the Change Line through Horses program does? You guys are actively going to schools in whichever district you're in and going, we offer this. Is it of any interest to any of your students?"
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many different ways that young people come to the programme. So it may be through, as you've just described, a parent coming across the programme that they then go to the school. It might be we've got an increasing number of centres that are working with electively home educated children, which has also risen astronomically since COVID. So that might be a family that makes that referral directly. We also, across the UK, there's a lot of local authorities have something called an approved provider list. So if you're an alternative provider, you might be doing catering, mechanics, hair and beauty, anything under the sun. You can go on your local authority approved provider list if there is one. And that is then something that schools access to go, right, so for Sam, really not working in school, we need an alternative on one day of the week. They will go and look at that approved provider list and see what is out there that they can commission for that young person in order to try and meet their needs a little bit more. Right. So some schools are proactive. And what we always talk about with our centres as well is being part of that community. So go out and find what's in your community. We've just launched at the BHS a strategy called Everyone Welcome. And that is very much around supporting local riding schools, whether they're Changing Lives or not, to actually really look at who's in your community who might not have accessed equestrian activities traditionally or historically, and are there aspects of your community that you can reach out to in order to make equestrianism more accessible, and not just riding. Do you need volunteers to come and paint some fencing? Do you need some people to be there to do different things? So it's around kind of riding schools being seen as community hubs in a way. And our riding schools that do Changing Lives are already 95% of the way there, because they're already engaging with their educational community in a way that they may not have done before.
Wow. So the riding school, again, I know I'm bouncing from ideas here. So the riding school has to be BHS approved, which, again, I'm speaking to Una and Sarah, isn't as daunting as it may sound. And then once they're approved, they can then start applying to become an approved centre with you guys.
For Changing Lives, yeah. We have a really simple application form that just asks some basic questions around qualifications and sort of space that they've got. And then Philippa or Emma will get in touch, and then we'll get on with that training really quickly. For the riding schools,
for any riding schools that are listening, like, how complicated is it? You know, could it be a riding school that has 4 staff in it? It could be that it can be as
any one size. Person.
Yeah. It could be any size.
Yeah, we just asked the riding school to identify a lead coach.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, and then that lead coach is responsible then for XYZ, I assume, as in the training of all the staff, is it? Or looking after the kids?
They would attend the training with us, and then they can filter that down to the rest of their team, but they would still act as the lead coach.
Right.
So what their responsibility is there is just to make sure that, you know, there's DBS checks in place, there's safeguarding checks in place, and actually the communication between them and whoever's referring the young person is kept strong.
Okay.
And then with others as well, so that we're getting the facts and the figures, and that's just so that we know who we need to communicate with and support, and they also know, you know, the parts of our team as well. But in terms of centres, we've got, you know, very small centres with 3 or 4 ponies,
really,
in remote areas of Scotland that do an absolutely incredible job with
I love that.
The local school that actually can only come so many months of the year due to weather.
Yeah.
You know, to other centres that have got 60, 70 young people attending the programme.
Right.
And I think that's a strength of the programme for us as a BHS point of view as well, because it can fit so flexibly into your business plan. So, you know, like Philippa has just said, we have centres that do the programme for a couple of hours on a Wednesday afternoon with their local primary school.
Right.
And then we have other centres that have really developed it to become a substantial part of their business. Monday to Friday, they've employed a teacher. They may have 15 kids on site every day, working with a range of commissioners, a range of schools, a range of local authorities. We've even got a couple of centres that have taken on education status. So the likes of Carrington that have ultimately moved to being that independent school model.
Yes.
But we've also got a centre in Shropshire that has looked at becoming a specialist post-16 provider. So we've got centres that, as a result of Changing Lives, have changed their business model and that they're doing. But within that, you can absolutely still do it with 1 coach and 2 kids on a Wednesday afternoon for an hour.
That's amazing.
So it fits in with your business model, which is why so many centres tell us, in terms of looking at that sort of diversification of business, it's been a lifesaver really for some riding centres. You know, that you almost argue that they're saving the kids' lives because of what they're offering, but actually from a business point of view, it's been hugely beneficial to our businesses as well.
So you're adding in essentially another revenue stream for them.
Absolutely.
Another lifeline in there. And as we, I'm sure you guys know as well, the riding schools these days are struggling with everything going up through the roof, and obviously people not having money to possibly come to the riding school. But then if this can give them that extra revenue stream, it could essentially save some of the businesses out there as well.
And it's great for the horses as well. So, you know, as part of our initial training, we obviously talk about horse welfare and how important it is for the horses. So we talk about things that more for that traditional riding school. It can give variety to the horses, that they're doing some sort of non-ridden work as well as kind of their ridden work. It can really benefit maybe your older horses that might be semi-retired, because it's giving them a purpose to do some of that groundwork with young people. You can kind of observe horse behaviour. So there might be horses that you wouldn't do close work with, but you would go to the field and watch how the horses are interacting with each other. And that can be a brilliant vehicle to start talking about the young person's own behaviour. So yeah, it's a kind of winner all round.
It doesn't have to necessarily be a winner or a loser in things that benefit. It sounds. I love it. This sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think it is about that, you know, reaching that other set of young people that to start to share the love for horses. Like that was instilled in me from very young. It's now instilled in my little boy, even though I would say, no, he's not going to be riding. It's too expensive. But actually, you know, we're instilling that love for horses.
Yeah.
And we need more people to, you know, to keep riding schools going. And that's only going to happen through more young people really feeling what horses can give you.
That wouldn't necessarily be the ones that have access to that 10 o'clock Saturday morning
Totally agree.
lesson, but actually through working with school as an alternative provision, they've come to do it. I mean, I know kind of you want to share some sort of individual stories at some point, but while we're on that, you know, we had a lad that was at one of our centres in Shropshire. He came as, I think, about a 15-year-old, had never been near a horse before in his life at 15, had been excluded from about 3 or 4 different schools. This was a kind of last-ditch attempt at something different to try and keep him in education. Absolutely fell in love with it,
Brilliant.
Turned out to be an absolutely brilliant rider. And we supported him to go to the National Racing College at Doncaster, where he completed their 12-week foundation course.
Really?
He's now working in a race yard in Birmingham.
Wow.
And that's a young lad at 15 that had never been near a horse before in his life.
That's
So
amazing.
they're the kind of young people that we're reaching through the program.
Wow. That is beautiful. Well, just going back as well with the children, I think it's so important for them to have something like this. And I think, to be honest with you, in my experience, the equestrian world is the only place that you can learn, you know, fall off, get back on. You know, your responsibility. You've got to feed that animal, or that's
Absolutely.
it. They're going to be in a lot of trouble. You know, these sort of things you don't learn anywhere else because there isn't that many places to learn it anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think. And I think the equestrian
And you think about that responsibility, what you're saying about feeding horses. Actually, we talk about this in our training, don't we? That actually we just think because we're horsey, oh, it's, you know, feeding a horse.
Yeah.
But actually, when you strip that down, there's so many things that you can teach these young people about feeding a horse. You know, why does that horse need that type of food? Are you as athletic as that person? Do you need that food? You know, healthy eating.
Yeah.
Stripping it all right back down to actually something that's a life skill for them. You know, eating the right foods, even though we all have the odd snack here and there of everything that we shouldn't. It's about them understanding that actually we're feeding the horse this. Actually, have you thought about your own diet?
Yeah.
You know, you've got a responsibility to keep yourself healthy as well as keep the horse healthy.
Yeah. And they don't teach those sort of things in school. They don't, you know, when I was a kid, I mean, I'm not that I'm skinny now, but, you know, I was vastly overweight when I was a child, but that was because I didn't know that eating a chocolate bar was good. I know that sounds really stupid now to understand that, but you don't understand when you're a kid when you eat a chocolate bar.
And it's just a different method of learning, isn't it? So, you know, Definitely. I guess in school, you would do about diet and nutrition as part of PSE lesson. As a tutor in school, so I taught English and drama on my subjects in school, but then everybody pretty much has a tutor group that you probably in most schools teach PSE to. I'm not overly interested in that as a topic as a teacher to teach to 30 odd 14-year-olds, so they're not going to be interested in it either. But bring a horse into the equation and start to talk about different horse nutrition and different weights of feed and hay nets and roughage and what they can have access to, all of a sudden it makes sense. And I think that's the thing. It's about working in a way that encourages young people to just make sense of learning and to make sense of the world around them. Because as we know, for so many young people, that is really tricky. And that's when you get the young people that may withdraw into themselves, withdraw into their bedroom, withdraw into exploring things online that may lead to, you know, devastating consequences that we've seen all too recently in the past couple of years and further beyond. So, you know, if we can offer an outlet for that young person to not become isolated, to spend 2 years in their bedroom just looking at things online. And like Philippa said, you know, we absolutely do work with young people that don't go anywhere else apart from to the stables on a Thursday because they can't manage anything else. But again, one of our stables down south, they had some funding for a young person last year. He'd not been in education for a couple of years. He came to the programme, I think, for about 9 months. He then started a college course in September because he developed those skills in order for college not to seem that completely unattainable you know, thing that I need to go because, you know, 9 months ago, he wouldn't have thought that he had the skills to even step through the door. And now he's accessing that college course.
So with the program as well, is that the next step? You do the program, and then would college be the next step, or would university be the next step? You know, in that traditional sort of sense.
It depends very much on their age, and what they want to do. So it is a life skills program. It's all transferable. So, ideally we would want them all to come into the equine industry and find that love and hunger for just being around horses all the time. But for some, we do have, they go off and become hairdressers. We've had lots of different avenues for them. So, they find the love of horses, and quite often they'll go into small animals.
Yes.
That's another route.
Yeah. I don't, again, there's not a one pathway.
No.
For some young people, said they will access the program for a number of weeks and then they'll carry on with their mainstream school, but hopefully with a few more skills in order to equip them with that. For some young people, it is a step to college, whatever that college course may be. For some young people, it will be a step onto BHS professional pathways. For some young people, it will be around just starting to engage with some kind of training and employment. So we do gather and that there's not a start and end point of the program. Young people can kind of access it at different points for different lengths. So it's not kind of you need to start here and you finish there. There are a number of pathways within the program. So that's what I said earlier. Some young people might just come for 6 weeks as part of something that their school has commissioned. Other young people might be there for 2 years as part of a longer term alternative provision pathway. But it is around those transferable skills, supporting that young person with the next steps. And one of the statistics that we gather is around what will they go on and do when they finish the program or leave the program for whatever reason. And based on last year's data, around 75% of young people have got a planned onward pathway. Amazing. So, they're not dropping off that cliff at the end of that.
Can you see this revolutionizing the educational system?
I think equine facilitated learning is still a relatively unheard of option. Whether that's changing lives through horses, whether it's, there's a number of equine assisted services providers across the UK. But I think for us, if we look at the growth of the programme over the last 4 years, it certainly felt like a really big movement, isn't it, within the equestrian industry, within education. And
we have centres that have got a waiting list.
Really?
So there's obviously there's a growing need, isn't there, in young people for, it's more centred around the funding. So if there's funding there, and when we talk a little bit about how long young people are on the programme, quite often that can be dictated to what funding is available as well. So it is, I can't see it slowing down, can you? And I think, we talked a little bit earlier about our centres invested in teachers. Actually, that's an investment that's being made potentially by a riding school that might be struggling in other areas of the business, but they can see the growth there. And what we talk to them about is making sure that you've got the right staff in place to be able to deliver this, the equine facilitated learning programme well, because that's what's important. Is we don't want these young people to come and have a challenging time at the stables. We want them to come, feel a sense of belonging there, feel actually that they're wanted there, and actually that, I was talking to a young person that's just done one of our stage 1 qualifications, and she said, I said, oh, how did you find, an assessment day is quite a big thing, isn't it? It's a big thing for any of us. And she said that 2 weeks before, she was like, I'm not doing it. Just not doing it, not doing it. And actually, through the coaches talking around, and she did it, and she said, actually, the Changing Lives Through Horses team at the centre have been the first people, so she's in the care system, care experience, that have never let her down. So she's had so many things promised to her
and
previously.
Believed in her as well.
Yeah, she's had so many things promised to her before that she's almost just had the rug pulled from underneath her, or she's not had the belief there. But actually just that routine of coming to the yard, being around the horses and her feeling like the horse is benefiting. And actually now she wants a career with horses. So I think,
that's lovely.
That's just like a nice story, isn't it, of just one person that was struggling before, but actually with all those things that our coaches and our centres can put in place for her, she's got a really positive outcome.
Well, it is a community. It's like we discussed it previously and in other walks of life. I've never experienced a community like this one. Okay, there's good and bad in it, but it's still a very, very strong community there. And everyone's always willing to help, always willing to support.
And so many stories. And I think what's really lovely is that we've absolutely got those anecdotal stories, and we capture testimonials and from schools as well. So we will have professional testimonials from school that talk about the difference that they see with the children back in school. So it's not just about the young person developing those skills, it's then visible skills that the schools kind of go, okay, wow, I can really see the difference with that young person. And with attendance, we talked about the big attendance issue at the moment. It might be that Changing Lives is the support mechanism that a school will commission in order to engage that young person that's not been in school for 6 months to actually re-engage with learning, re-engage with having that purpose that we've talked about, and then they're back in school. So it's a really tangible stepping stone. And as well as those anecdotal stories, we've spent the last 18 months working with the University of Buckingham and a team of researchers there.
Okay.
And they have done some research for us around the programme, and their findings came out with that Changing Lives does statistically significantly bring about psychological and physical behavioural outcomes. So we've now got a university-backed study that says this works. So it's not just me and Philippa sitting here going, this works.
There's science behind it.
It's great. There's now science behind it with the research that we've done with the University of Buckingham.
So, you said about the attendance as well. And obviously when the kids come to the Change Lives program in these centres, what is the attendance? Like they say they're going to come, do they all turn up? Is it 100%? Is it 10%? Or what sort of attendance percentage?
So our centres would measure that themselves, but what we do see is that actually, because they want to come, they feel like they're benefiting the horse that day. It actually does get them out of bed.
Yeah.
I can think of a story of where we worked with another organisation, and we had kids that came for 2 days, and I can remember being there the first day, and there was an outside coach that was going to be delivering the sessions, and it was a huge mixture. They'd all come from a pro, and the guy that had bought them said, I've worked in a pro for 20 odd years. What's all this horse malarkey kind of thing? And he said to me, he'd never seen the kids want to listen and regulate themselves. And I think the thought of them being able to touch a horse. Really? And he said, and it was a Thursday and a Friday, and I remember it. And he said, tomorrow's Friday. And he used to go around picking the kids up. And he said, you'll be lucky if you get 3 kids tomorrow. And we got all of them back bar one. And he actually couldn't believe it. And he said, they really wanted to come back because, actually they were around the horses, and, there were participants there that were saying to the others, be quiet, we need to listen to this. And he really couldn't believe it. And to be honest, even though I've seen these things happen before, when the kids got off the bus, I was like, oh my gosh, what kind of day are we in for today? Because they were like all fighting and arguing. I'm not wearing a hat. No, I'm not sitting there. I was like, this is going to be a long 2 days. But honestly, they were, after saying they're not going to put a hat on and then said, okay, you can't go around the horses, they were all up, hats on, stood in stables with ponies, doing their heart rate, doing the horse's heart rate.
Wow.
And it just, even within an hour, the change, the guy was just like, I can't believe this. Like, when he said, we were laughing about, coming in, I've got 2 days at the stables with these kids. What's that going to be like? And he said, I honestly can't believe it. Can't believe it. And some of those kids signed up to volunteer at the centre as well.
Really?
After it,
so they continued on with it as well?
Yeah.
So, like, according to those statistics, your attendance is in the 90s must be.
Yeah, I mean, most centres will tell you that if a young person comes that has had attendance issues in education, it ceases to become an issue when they're attending Changing Lives Through Horses.
Wow.
Yeah, but it comes back to that purpose again.
Yeah.
It comes back to that purpose, being seen, being heard, having people that I know are going to believe in me, having certificates that I can take home at the end of each week. Having that sense of progress and achievement. In a way, it's not rocket science, but it is something that we've been able to facilitate that is now having impact. So since 2016, we've actually just registered our 4,000th participant since 2016. So, that's 4,000 children that have had that positive experience through the Changing Lives Through Horses programme.
It's fantastic. It's great. So obviously horses being a massive part of it. Do you guys have any horse stories that stick out to you in your mind over the years?
I think like horses have, as I said before, have always been a massive part of my life, and I think actually they've made me quite a resilient person as well. And if you think about perseverance, we actually laugh about it in our team that I'm very much a morning person, so I'm out with the crack of dawn, but then I'm very much not an evening person. So if someone says, "Did you see this on telly?" I'm like, "No, I was asleep." And I think it's because I've always been up very early, and by the time the evening comes, I'm absolutely knackered because I've been out with the horses all day. And I think that's quite a personal thing for me, is that, you know, horses have always been part of my life. So whatever challenges I've had in life, I've always gone to the horses. And I think, you know, from coaching over the years, you know, I can remember working once with the BBC, and we had this young person that was coming. She was having quite an intensive few weeks of lessons, popped her on my favourite pony that I absolutely loved. And on the day that the BBC came to film her do like a competition, he just wouldn't play ball, and he was like, "Well, this is an exciting day." So then we had to bring a pony in that looked kind of similar.
A stunt double.
Yeah, to do his job. And I think that's the thing with working it with horses, is you can always think they're never going to let you down. That, you know, and actually, what we've got to remember is they've got their own personality as well, haven't we? So when we talk about in our training as well about, is every horse you know being able to be used for changing lives, we quite often talk about just going to observe horses in a field altogether. Will teach the kids so much about dealing with other personalities that you might come across in life, and especially on the yard.
Oh yeah, well, it's herd watching. That's what it's called, isn't it? The first time you do mention, it might have been Una and Sarah mentioned it.
I think it was.
Yeah.
And I was like, "What's that?" It's like people literally go and watch
a paid activity that some do, but
for
some centres have developed it as a paid activity that you can come and do some mindfulness with the horses. But for the Changing Lives, it's very much about, you know, I think some centres will come to the training and they'll be thinking, "Oh yeah, it's my quiet horses that will stand there and they like to be pampered and you know, can manage sort of that." And yes, obviously from a risk assessment point of view, in terms of close work, they are absolutely the ponies that you'll be working with. But we always say, you know, don't discount your wider herd population, because they can all contribute something, from your moody mare that doesn't want anybody in the stable. So what's going on there? What can we talk about with that? To, you know, your youngsters that might be out in the field sort of playing with each other, but it might be quite rough play. And so what does that look like? And it's just, and if you think maybe about a traditional way that a young person would be spoken to about their behaviour, that might be very much in a assistant head's office at school or in your head of years office, and you're sat there face to face in a room with an adult. You think that you've probably done something wrong, so you're not overly going to be wanting to talk to this person. But if we again move that out of that environment to a position where actually we've spent half an hour talking about horse behaviour, and then as we're walking back to the yard, so, you know, what's it like for you when you're in school? You know, how do you feel when you're in a crowded corridor? You know, what's that about for you? And that's not somebody looking at you over a table going, "Tell me what's the problem." It's just a different way of working with young people. And for all the things we've talked about today, it is a hugely successful way of working with young people.
Yeah. It does. I find that as well. I remember I won a prize at school, actually, and I went to, like, you know, you had the really grumpy teacher in your school, and she was the one who organised it, and she kept calling me in to sort out this prize. But every time she called me in, I was panicking like mad. I was like, "What have I done wrong? What have I done? I'm going to get shouted at." But if she went and had a conversation with me in the playground, in this situation, next to some, you know, an arena or on a walking through the field or whatever it is, it'd be a hell of a lot less anxious for me. I think that's probably what you're finding, isn't it, with them?
Absolutely. And I think it's moving away from the idea of alternative provision, whether it's equine facilitated alternative provision or something else. And, you know, I've been involved in alternative provision for over 20 years. And I think there's still that feeling, coming back to that head teacher that said, "I'm not paying for your daughter to learn how to ride." There's that feeling that alternative provision is a bit of a reward sometimes. And that's why some schools are a bit reluctant to commission alternative provision. And again, then particularly maybe with horses, kind of see it as, "Oh, that's a reward." So we work really hard. And I guess the stuff from the University of Buckingham has helped as well for us to say, this isn't a reward. It is a structured education program that's going to bring about those outcomes for that young person. And if we look at the kind of special educational needs code of practice, the phrase used in that is reasonable adjustment. So if you're a school and you're working with a young person and for whatever reason they've got some additional needs that you are not able to put a strategy in place in school to work, then a reasonable adjustment might be commission alternative provision.
Yeah.
So, it's there, it's in the code of practice. It's not something completely out there to do. It's not sending a rocket ship to the moon. It's there within most schools' capability of kind of thinking, right, we need to support this young person. How can we do that? We're going to do that with some alternative provision. Oh, our local riding school offers changing lives through horses. That's going to be a great option for that young person.
Just going back to the university findings, do you have any statistics on that, or is there any other information that you can give us on that? Because that was really interesting.
So we've released a paper. So Dr. Lindsay Roberts, that led on that, is putting together some research papers. So we're hoping that they're going to be published in the future. But with the work that they did, it was using a biopsychosocial model. And what they do, I know, is kind of put the information from the program into a psychological statistical profiling, essentially. And what that came out with was to say that the improvements shown by the young people is significant within that psychological model.
In what sort of
terms of that behavioural change. Right. So it's like it's a statistical model. If you were doing any kind of psychological research, there are a number of models and programs that you can apply your data and your research to, and that kind of, if it comes out as statistically significant, you can then say, well, that shows it works.
So it's showing that how important, how good it's been for that
so they did a number of things as part of the research. She her and her team did a literature review of kind of different equine assisted previous research to kind of pull some common themes from there. They did a questionnaire with some young people, and then they did some in-depth interviews with some young people and parents, and pulled out some thematic issues from there as well. Right. So it's more qualitative research than quantitative research.
Right. Okay. But it shows that there is an improvement to be had here,
and it fits in with that psychological statistical model. It's not just as saying, it's good.
Go ride a horse. No, I'm joking. As what some schools clearly seem to be thinking it is. So you said you've had over 4,000 kids come into the program. Have you got any stories that you could tell us from that have really stuck out to you?
I think we have already talked about a couple of young people, but there's certainly, and we're really privileged. And I think whenever we get a testimonial in, whoever it comes directly to, we'll always share it across the team. It's best bit of the job. Meeting people in person, best bit of the job. Second best bit of the job, reading a testimonial that kind of comes in. And I guess my one was probably to talk about Charlie. So Charlie is a young man who I've met now on a number of occasions, because he's at a centre that is not too far away from me. So it's one that I've visited a couple of times. Charlie had come to Changing Lives in kind of the upper end of primary school. So I think when he was kind of 9 or 10, number of needs, autistic, ADHD, some learning difficulties as well, dyspraxia. So a range of neurodiverse conditions. Found primary school really tricky, was also being brought up by grandparents. So there'd been some sort of family trauma in his background as well. And he described school as being like a thunderstorm in his head. It was just sensory overload, couldn't manage it, was quite bullied by the other children at school as well, because when someone's different, a lot of kids don't really manage children that are different. So school was just a really upsetting experience for him. Grandma had to really try hard to take him every day, and quite often she talks about coming home in tears herself because she'd left him at school and she knew he was going to have such an awful time. So they come across Changing Lives Through Horses. Charlie came to Four Winds in Lincolnshire, and Katie, his grandma, talks about after a day she could see that he was a different child, that he had relaxed, he was kind of feeling less anxious about things. School agreed to him then coming for part of his week to go through the Changing Lives Through Horses programme. And then over that year that he was there at that upper end of primary school, Kirsty and the team at Four Winds worked with his primary school to put together information to support grandma to apply for specialist school for him, because mainstream school wasn't working. And he went on to then start a special school placement. And that was with the information that the riding school and the coaches were able to draw together to say, look, this is what works for Charlie. This is what you need to create or manage or offer him in school. And then Charlie became a bit of a star because at Four Winds, and you can look at it back on their Facebook page, they came up with almost a video magazine program called Look Horse.
Okay.
So they would film each week this kind of magazine program, and Charlie very much became the star of that. And he would be talking confidently to the phone and the camera, and be pulling in the other young people on the program and talking all about the horses and interviewing people. Me and a colleague went one day, and the kids interviewed us for part of that Look Horse program that he was doing.
Wow.
And then last year in October, we had a Changing Lives showcase down at the Worshipful Company of Saddlers, who are big supporters of the programme. And we had our vice patron, Princess Anne, in attendance with us as well as Martin Clunes, our president.
Yes.
So Charlie came down for that event. His grandma spoke about their journey and about their experience with Charlie by her side in the Great Hall at Saddlers, very kind of daunting environment. Yeah, he spoke to everybody. Martin was just such a great kid, and they all had their pictures taken together. He was the posy presenter to Princess Anne. And, Grandma was just like, 12 months ago, this would not have happened.
Oh, that was all in the space of a year?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he's only I think he's 12 now. So, yeah, we're talking a relatively short amount of time.
Oh, my goodness.
So I think when we talk about it, Charlie, because he was just an absolute star, wasn't he?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Without this program, that would have never ever happened for Charlie.
No, he quite possibly would have still been in mainstream school system, having an absolute awful experience.
No, that's that I get tingles for that. Was a great.
He's
a great story.
Fantastic kid.
Oh, well done, Charlie. If you're watching, well done. Yeah. Brilliant. But I was expecting you to say, and 4 years later, because we started in 2016 or wherever it was.
No, not at all.
And it was in a year. So
I think there's some really swift turnarounds of young people.
I think it's really powerful that it's the routine, isn't it, of them coming and that feeling that they are safe where they're going and they're listened to, and there's no judgment at the riding schools. Everyone is welcome. It's about them coming, getting the feeling for what horses are, and starting to find a love and a passion in something that perhaps they've never been involved with before.
Wow. Oh, that's a great.
I love that. Charlie's a star. I think there's some photographs from Saddlers last year on the BHS Facebook page as well. So have a look.
Honestly, that was a lovely story. Really, really like that. Have you come across any Philippa as well? Or?
I think a lot of. So I support quite a lot of the young people that are doing the stages, that are doing the stage 1. We give them that opportunity to get onto our career pathway.
The stage 1 is
so that's the first step on our career pathway. So they can either do like a groom option or a riding option or both.
So it's a BHS qualification.
Yeah, it's a BHS qualification. Yeah. So I've been really fortunate enough to kind of go and see them, almost like taking along a stranger with us, Julian, who assesses for us at the stage 1. And there's a young person there, again, 6-12 months before, really struggling with their mental health, ended up in hospital. Their anxiety affected her that much that she couldn't walk in the end. Yeah. And actually through finding a love of horses, engaging with Wirral Riding Centre, her mum actually drives her almost an hour each day to get there. She had quite a traumatic background previously, and actually she went on to do her stage 1 and actually also attended the same event as Charlie.
Oh, wow.
And actually, if you were to think about looking at her in the room, where, Saddlers Hall, it's quite overwhelming for all of us.
I've never been. I've never seen it all.
Quite posh.
It's very grand.
You have to get rid of your accent. You can't go in like this. Yeah. You have to go, hello.
They are, but incredible people.
Yes.
And hugely supportive of the program.
Really, really supportive of the program. And actually, for the first 10 minutes, she found it very, very daunting being there. Like, Charlie actually came into his own, didn't he? And was very smiling, happy. But actually, Olivia and her mum just went off for 10 minutes, regulated themselves, and then came back and spoke, and also met...
she spoke as well?
No, her mum. No, she came and spoke to everybody that was from Saddlers Hall and mingled. Wow. And actually, it gave them a real sense of what the programme is about as well. They're huge supporters of us. And although they get to go out on some centre visits, it's really nice for them to meet parents,
Mhm.
meet the young people
Mhm.
in a very unfamiliar environment to them as well.
But this is it. I bet you've got loads of stories like
So
this.
many.
I bet you've got
So
Yeah.
many.
But those two are just like, clearly it's given these kids confidence and the opportunity that they never would have had,
Yeah.
wouldn't have been for the
And I think,
program.
you know, it's really, in my previous role, I've worked with a lot of families that have had young people with special educational needs. And I think it's really, really sad that the language that families use is fight. I have to fight for my children, and it's a battle. And I think it's really sad that families feel that way, that everything is so hard. Some families that have a child with special educational needs, depending on where you are, it can be a bit of a postcode lottery as well. But, you know, we speak to so many parents that are, you know, at the wit's end, don't know what to do. And, you know, if we're able to facilitate access to changing lives through horses for them, those are the ones that come back and go, it literally does what it says on the tin. You know, it has been
Changes life.
life-changing.
I think that's the difficult part of our job, isn't it? Is we see the glory of going out to see the kids and they're progressing once they've got funding in place, but you know, you never know who you're going to answer the phone to. So, you know, sometimes you speak to parents and you get off like, you need 5 minutes to regulate yourself, because actually, as a parent ourselves, you know, you're not having that fight for your kids, but some of them are like, really are having to fight, aren't they? They really are struggling. And
and children that haven't been in school for sort of 2 years, and you know, parents that may be going to tribunal, a whole range of different things.
What happens to the children who don't get funding?
So if it comes from a parental inquiry, as I said, we work really hard. We ask if they're happy to share details of their child's school, if they are on a school roll, and then I or one of the team will make contact with that school so that we're making sure that that school have got the right information. And because you can't make a decision as a head teacher if you've not got that right information, or as a special needs coordinator. So for me, it's always about information first, and hopefully that will then provide that information for the school to go, actually, yeah, I can see this is a really good option, and that's something that we can go with. Because of my background working in local authority advisory roles, I can signpost parents to different areas of support. So there's a couple of really good organisations and websites that I will direct parents to that have kind of got some legal advice for parents as well. If you've got you know, a parent that hasn't had a child in school for 2 years, actually, it's not okay for that school to go, not been in school for 2 years, I'm not going to do anything about that. The school have a duty to think about what they can do for that. So I will always kind of signpost to that. Some of our centres have become really good at changing their business model. So they've become CICs. So that means a community interest company, so like a not-for-profit. So they can run their Changing Lives through a separate strand, which means they can apply for different funding themselves. So like Sport England funding or different grants that they wouldn't necessarily get as a sole proprietor organisation. So that can support them to offer Changing Lives. We've got some centres that are really good at getting local sponsorship. So they will reach out to local businesses in terms of sponsoring young people. And then from the donations that come into Changing Lives Through Horses, we allocate a certain amount each year to be able to offer bursaries to young people. So that is a limited amount. We'd like to do more. You know, our fundraising team work incredibly hard with our funders, applying for new grants, working with people that have funded us previously. But as you can imagine, when we release information about bursaries, there's always a higher demand than we can offer. But last year, for example, we gave around £40,000 worth in bursaries for young people last year from donations that have come into the programme. So that allows us to work with families and young people that really haven't got any other access to provide that opportunity. So fundraising, hugely important. So, you know, in talking today, we've hopefully talked about how riding schools can get involved, how parents and schools can get involved, but actually all of that is underpinned by a huge fundraising ask as well. So we're always interested in hearing from other people who would like to make donations into the programme that enables us to do all of this.
Wow, that 40,000. So how many places did that buy, or does it not work like that?
I think it worked out to about 50 young people
Really? Wow.
that had some funding in order to access. So it's fairly short term. It is intended to be a stepping stone for that young person rather than a fund a long term access to the program.
Yeah.
And we will never have enough money to fulfill that demand.
No.
Unless obviously I said our fundraising levels come up, and then we would love to be able to use more of that money for bursaries.
That's it. This is it. It's all underpinned by. It's always That's always the problem, isn't it? With these sort of things, they're all so amazing. They help so many people, but then if the funding isn't there from the schools or councils,
yeah. But we have some amazing supporters, don't we? So we've mentioned the Sadlers and Worshipful Company of Loriners also supporters.
Amazing.
We had a really good donation from Pets at Home Foundation last year.
Really?
So a whole number of foundations that work with us. We've worked before with the Sir Peter O'Sullivan Trust as a huge supporter of the programme as well. And then sometimes we will get a cheque for £10 in the post saying, please use this for Changing Lives Through Horses.
That's brilliant.
And all of that funding is ring-fenced for Changing Lives Through Horses. It doesn't go anywhere else in the VHS.
Yeah.
It is purely used for Changing Lives Through Horses.
It's not put in the big pot. It's
not at all.
So there's always a way, one way or another, to get these young people into.
Hopefully, we certainly try to be really creative in supporting any parents that contact us. But sometimes we can't find a route. So I wouldn't want to sit here and say yes, we can always find a way. Sometimes we can't because we have within our boundaries and what we have, but we do our best.
Is there any, so in those sort of instances where you're not, for whatever reason, a child isn't able to join the program, is there any other ways that you can say to them, okay, well, why don't you but go down to your riding school and see if there's anything you can help with, or you can, because I remember back in the day, not anymore, but there was like a helpers course in the riding school, and they had their own little community. It was just literally helping with the on the yard or mucking out or whatever it was, and that gave them a good sense of community responsibility. So is there any other advice?
I think the volunteering with the riding schools is quite tricky.
Yes.
Some centres,
we had to stop it.
Don't want to manage volunteers, or not. They don't want to. It's actually they don't have the staff in to be able to manage those. But actually, for the needs of these young people, sometimes a volunteer role on a Saturday and a Sunday at the riding school's busiest time wouldn't be the right environment to
help and support
them. But we do have some young people that do go on to volunteer. So I can think of one young person, Megan. She was accessing the programme twice a week. She was actually one bursary funded. So one day funded by parents. She was taken out of school because it just wasn't working for her by her parents. And BHS bursary funded a day a week as well. Now that bursary part has ended. Actually, she's got herself to a place where she's actually completed her stage 1, and she does go on a volunteer basis now to volunteer at the centre with the hope that actually those skills will carry on increasing and improving. And, the love of horses is there, that she does want a career in horses, but it's just very small steps for her at the moment that will hopefully lead on to big things.
It sound. I mean, the stories that you've told me sound amazing. The program itself sounds amazing. I would love for it to be instead of 40,000, half the country.
Yeah, and we have conversations all the time around kind of upscaling, I guess is the word, because it's then not just about growth. Clearly, within the team, we also work hard to quality assure what's going on.
Yeah, well, this is
in terms of the training that we give to centres. So we work hard to try and balance that quality assurance with growth as well. And then ultimately it is around that upscaling. And for some centres, that is around employing a teacher, making it kind of that educational offer as a bigger part of their business. In some ways, it's around, where would we go next? And I think one of the interesting things is that, we know that riding schools are facing challenges at the moment, and a number of riding schools have closed over kind of recent years. But what we are finding now is that we are seeing some equine organisations and settings come on board as BHS approval because they want to do changing lives through horses. So they go through that BHS approval process because actually they've heard about changing lives. It is this fantastic ready-made program that they can offer, and they want to become part of that BHS family in order to be able to offer changing lives in there. So, you know, I think, like we said earlier, we definitely see that continued growth, and in a range of different settings as well. So at the moment, we've got settings from trekking. So we've got our riding schools, but we've also got centres that are more trekking centres, but they've kind of offered changing lives. We've got some equestrian centres within private school settings that offer changing lives, both for young people that are on roll at the school and within their community as well. We've got education charities like the Mare and Foal Sanctuary in Devon that offer a number of different pathways, but also do changing lives. So they're not a traditional riding school. They're primarily a horse rescue charity. So already we've got a number of different settings that offer changing lives, which again shows how flexible it is to bring into that business model.
Sounds amazing. That sounds, because then you can fit into any equestrian background. But you touched on it then, in the future. What plans have you got for the future? What's your aim in 10 years' time, 5 years' time? Have you?
So one of our immediate targets is still around growth. So we have, I've just talked about different settings, but if we look at pure riding schools, that is, they're primarily registered as a riding school, we've got just under 400 British Horse Society approved riding schools across the UK. And our 3-year target is certainly to be in 50% of those BHS approved riding schools. So at the minute, I think we're at about 35%.
Oh, right.
So
big growth.
So that's kind of a 3-year target that half of British Horse Society approved riding schools are trained to deliver changing lives through horses. And then I think there are projects that we're working on. So one of the things we've developed over the last 2 years that we've not touched on is that we do have an accredited qualification within the Changing Lives Through Horses programme. So that is a personal development qualification. It's not an equine qualification, but it is on the Ofqual framework. It is the equivalent to a GCSE at level 1 and level 2. So that has really taken off in the last year. So we've had about 100 young people over the last 2 years take that and be awarded it at a different level. And we can see that growing a lot more over the next sort of 2 to 3 years in terms of numbers. Philippa has talked about our BHS Stage 1 opportunity that we're giving to young people.
Yeah. So I think it's just about giving them opportunities that, I suppose, still fit in with changing lives, but giving them a hope of a future.
I think it's creating those pathways within the programme so that young people aren't falling off at the end. I think we've been very conscious of what happens next. So we want to kind of embed pathways into the programme that young people can follow. And then kind of within BHS strategy, I've already mentioned our Everyone Welcome strategy that I think absolutely ties in with changing lives. We've also got our Second Chance programme that I think has got a real synergy. Do you want to talk?
So the Second Chance programme is about giving horses a second chance as well. So it actually did originate with Changing Lives Through Horses centres. Because we were getting donations for people that wanted to help horses and wanted to help young people as well. So it just really fitted together. So what we did was we worked really closely with the RSPCA. I went to RSPCA centres and me and it was Tracy, who was our director of fundraising at the time. We would go and make selections of these horses and then they would be rehomed in our riding schools that were running Changing Lives. And then they would work closely with the Changing Lives young people. So you would think that putting perhaps a nervous rescue horse with a Changing Lives participant wouldn't work. But what our riding schools really did show is actually that those young people could really connect with the horses.
Really?
And the horse could really connect with the Changing Lives young person.
Wow.
And it was like
real synergy there.
Yeah, almost 2 traumatic backgrounds have been brought together and actually have blossomed into amazing relationships.
That's a great idea.
So I think the aim, so far we've rehomed 112 second chance horses. So the idea is to push that out further and for more riding schools.
And we've just started working with other charities as well, haven't we? So as well as the RSPCA, the team are now working with Bransby Rescue as well.
Bransby Rescue.
So Bransby is another horse rescue
Oh,
charity.
I've not heard about it. Yeah.
So they've got a site in Lincolnshire. I think they've got a couple of sites as well.
Right. Okay.
So again, showing, because again, some people might not think that a riding school life is a good life for a pony, but actually coming into a BHS approved riding school, with our team have worked really hard with those charities to show that actually this can be a great life for a horse or a pony. And particularly then tying it in with Changing Lives Through Horses, with seeing that real synergy between the kids kind of understanding that horse has had a kind of tough start in life perhaps, and has not gone according to plan, and there's some real synergy there. So I think for us, in terms of the future, it's about kind of tying. We already work really closely with a number of other BHS teams, but continuing to kind of make Changing Lives kind of central to a lot of the other things that we're doing within the BHS.
I really like that with the second chance. I really like that. Whose idea was that? That was a great idea. I heard that.
I'm not sure
that.
whose
That was a great
idea it
idea.
was.
Started before I came.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, so it's been going. How long has it been going for?
So it was very early days when I started in 2019. So it kind of.
It's been going a while.
Yeah, we did a few,
Right.
and then obviously COVID hit.
Yeah.
So now it's actually just been picked up, and it's now sitting more in the approvals team because we're too busy.
Yeah, I bet you are.
to do it. So and it's rolled out beyond Changing Lives.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we talked about like what your aim is for going, but then how are you gonna get more kids into this? So an example. I've got a kid, like my little girl, she's horse obsessed, but what about if she wasn't, but she's still struggling at school, but she hasn't quite found that, I'm not too sure if horses is for me. Is there any sort of testers or anything they can do? Or
so we always say to our centres to do like almost like a bit of an open day.
Yeah.
That you can then invite teachers along, parents along, carers along, to meet the horses.
Right.
And then also to do very much an assessment with them, so they come and actually, is the yard for them?
Yeah.
you know, and it might be that on the first time they don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Second time they're like, Third time they get soaking wet, covered in mud, and they're thinking it's really not for me. But then the fourth time, then they've really found their own. And it's a thing of, for a lot of these young people, is they found everything challenging, and as soon as they found it challenging, they've not had the support there to almost build on those foundations and to get them to that next step. So what our Changing Lives instructors coaches are really good at is keeping them encouraging, keeping them coming. The environment's so different to the school.
Definitely.
Actually, okay, if horses aren't for you, we had a young person that came and he really didn't like the horses. It just wasn't for him. But what he did like doing was mending fencing, leveling the arena, doing all of the yard handy jobs around the yard. So he actually worked with the proprietor's husband, did all of that, and they actually took him on as a volunteer. And
Really?
I think he did go to paid employment with them, So actually, by being at the yard, it's not just about being with the horses. It could be that they go on to do all of the maintenance.
So are these open days are they plastered somewhere? Is it on the riding school? Is it
So
on the BHS sites?
very much at a local level. So I guess my comment around that is it's kind of twofold. So it's very much working at that local level with that community school support and community riding school to support them to be that community hub. So as a team, we will support individual riding schools to make sure that they've got their marketing right, that they've got their information right. So they've got that kind of pack almost to send out to schools to support the engagement within that local community. So I think that's one level of supporting and raising awareness of the programme. And then at a national level, we're also really keen that we've got a voice within that equine assisted services conversation. So we're really excited. Some of your listeners will know that it's the National Equine Forum next Thursday, 6th of March. That is free to stream this year if you're not there in person. And we actually have an equine assisted services section at NEF in the afternoon. I think it's at 2:30 it's scheduled for. So that's being chaired by Ed Brasher, who was chair of the RDA, is now chair of the Equine Assisted Services Partnership, which is a body that is looking to represent equine assisted services practitioners, whatever your modality. So whether you're education, whether you're therapy, whether you're anything in between, it's a body of practitioners that have come together to say, we want to be a voice for the industry, a voice to understand that actually this is a really viable part of the equestrian and equine industry. So Ed is chairing that. We've got some colleagues from Strength and Learning Through Horses, which is a centre down near London that are talking. And then we've also got a Changing Lives Through Horses parent and young people that are talking at NEF about their experience.
Wow.
And we've also got a colleague that's done some work with us over the last couple of years talking about why young people may need equine assisted services. So young people that may have gaps in their development, that have that trauma early in early life. So it should be a really interesting section, and absolutely thrilled that NEF have picked up that this is a real topical section to be delivering at NEF this year. So I think
the first time, is this the first time it's been delivered?
We've touched on, so last year at NEF, there was a section around industry accessibility that was chaired by Beverly Sims, who's our BHS trustee for diversity. So there's definitely been sections before that's talked about accessibility and diversity, but I've certainly not, while I've been involved with the BHS, we haven't had anything that's been done at that level around equine assisted services.
So it's clearly becoming
really excited that we've got that at NEF next week.
Oh, amazing. So it sounds like every year it just keeps getting growing and growing
and
growing. Which
but
is
I think
it's
that combination of supporting riding schools to be that community hub that Changing Lives can be very much a part of, but also as the British Horse Society supporting that national and global conversation around equine assisted services and equine facilitated learning.
Wow. But again, if anybody's really struggling to find anything, just contact you guys.
Yeah, so we have recently updated our web pages on the BHS website. So yes, please do log on to the BHS website, search for Changing Lives Through Horses if you can't find the tab. And there's a number of, some of the stories we've talked about today are on there.
Oh, wow.
There's some school stories on there as well. There's all the information about the programme. There's an option to put in a web inquiry. So you can just do that inquiry on the web page and it will come through to us. There's also our team telephone number on there, so you can call us. So yeah, everything you need is on that website, and it has recently been updated, so it is all up to date.
Amazing. Well, I'll put all the links as well, everything in the descriptions. But is there anything that we've not talked about today that we should have really talked about that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I had some more facts and figures, but they're all quite depressing ones.
Why? What sort of facts and figures?
So we talk about the Good Childhood Report, which is a report that the Children's Society do every year.
Okay.
And it's a survey of around 2,000 10 to 15-year-olds. And it's really around life satisfaction, I guess. So they ask a number of questions. And the 2024 report showed that children's happiness and well-being continues to decline out of the population that they talk to. So they quote 11% of children that talk about a low life satisfaction, around 15% that are unhappy with school. So they then kind of talk about some recommendations, and part of that recommendations are things like early intervention, prioritising children's play, working to eradicate childhood poverty, lots of things like that. And when we look at Changing Lives Through Horses, that's absolutely, again, what we're doing. It's providing that early intervention, that opportunity to do something different, to hopefully improve the lives of young people.
I think the program's amazing. I really do. And the more and more, I touched on it like a little bit with Sarah and Una, but I like to delve this deep into it with you guys, and the stories that you've told me are really, really, honestly lovely, really lovely. So I hope it continues to grow substantially, take over the whole of the UK and the world with horses. I think so. I think that wouldn't be a bad thing.
Horses are fantastic educators, and they're so empathetic. I think I read some research a while ago that talked about if you know anything about the brain, we've got something in our brain called the limbic system, which is where our emotions sit. And I read some research a while ago that showed that a horse's limbic system is the same size as a human's limbic system.
Really?
Which can suggest why horses are so empathetic with humans.
I did not know that. But you hear all these stories, these magical stories, don't you? Maybe that, I don't know.
But I think there is a connection, and I think I've sometimes been asked before in media about why horses. So, we know quite a lot of schools now have therapy dogs and reading dogs. And we've even got a centre in Leicestershire, New Leaf Triangle, that have a range of animals, and they've got 2 massive pigs called Rhubarb and Custard, I think. And they post pictures of the kids laying on the pig reading a book. So yeah, the pig is there reading Buddy. So lots of things like that. But I think with horses, like we've talked about, it is that responsibility of a creature that is so big and so does rely on that human interaction to look after them and kind of benefits from it. And, you know, I can certainly think, I'm sure Philippa's got far more examples, but in the places that I've rode at over the years where they've sometimes had horses that they've tried to retire and the horse is just miserable in the field. Yeah. It wants human contact. It wants purpose. It wants that connection, doesn't want to just live out in the field and do nothing. So yeah, I think horses are absolutely amazing to be working with on the programme for what they offer the young people.
I do. I think they're great.
Just empower them, don't they? Like, we all feel empowered when we've, you know, maybe ridden a horse that's a bit tricky. We're still on at the end. Or, you know, for these young people, it could just be that they've managed to put a head collar on.
Yes.
A bigger horse than they did last week. It's like really empowering for them to, I suppose, be around a horse that doesn't talk back to them, doesn't knock them down, or doesn't, you know, take away their confidence in a way like bullying and things like that. You know, actually they're really good at building self-esteem and just making them feel wanted and needed, and I just love it.
They understand you, don't they? It's like, you know, I don't ride anymore because I think I'm far too heavy for some horses. But anyway, but when I did, or when I got out to the horses that we've got here, they just come to you and they just put the head on your shoulder or in your chest and they give you a little horse hug. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what sort of feeling it is. I don't know. I don't understand it. Yeah. But I just feel like, oh, you're so sweet. Yeah. And then usually what comes out the backside of them as well is I'm thinking, I don't want to be doing that. I want to be clearing this up at the moment. But no, I think it is. I think there is some magical aspect about them. Everyone's got a story, or everyone knows of a story of how horses have helped people through hard things and how they are their therapy. I know my wife Shan, she'll make sure if she, at the yard is her headspace, mucking out is her headspace, riding I don't have to think about anything else, and it's that break from the world, I think, maybe helps with these children as well.
And it, like you said, and it is just that trigger. It's the connection with the horse that comes first, and then they realise that they can actually apply that learning, and it actually is going to give them a pathway on. But it's definitely the connection with the horse that comes first, and then everything else follows.
Do you think also there's some aspect of you know, you said about the boy with the ping pong, the pin table. Do you think there's some sort of, because there's a break, there's a sever from every day, then it gives them
I definitely think there's something about breaking the cycle. So again, I mean, I've worked with probably thousands of kids over the years that have either been permanently excluded or at risk of exclusion. And absolutely, huge majority of those children and young people will get themselves to a point where they just can't see a way out of what's going on in their life. So they're in a kind of whirlwind, I guess, of just going round, or the ping ball scenario. And actually, yes, if that young person can be offered an alternative provision programme, such as Changing Lives Through Horses, that can break that spin that they've got into, then that absolutely can make a difference.
I think also, do you think also, again, I'm going on a tangent here, the main things in life, diet, sleeping, exercise, 3 main pillars to make sure that you stay mentally healthy and physically healthy. And I don't know about you, but previously when I was a kid, I didn't have a lot of those things. My sleep was awful, my diet was awful, and my exercise was non-existent. Do you think these kids that are coming into the Changing Lives, it's giving them that exercise, that physical activity, it's giving them that 6 o'clock wake up call?
Routine. We all love routine, don't we? And horses are so routine based that actually the kids want to almost sync with the horse's routine because they don't want to upset the horse. So, you know, the horse needs feeding. I've got to get myself out of, oh, you know what, I don't feel very well today, or I don't really want to get out of my bedroom. But, you know, actually, that horse needs me today. I've got to get there. And everyone says that when they see the kids come in, the first few times that they come, and they don't really know what they're coming to, it's like, oh, you know, almost like they're being dragged there. But then by a couple of weeks in, it's the excitement of,
Yeah.
They're up. They want to get to the yard and
Yeah.
they want to be around the horses. They want to be with those new friendship groups that they've made, and perhaps before they didn't have any friends.
Yeah.
So it's about getting them to feel a new excitement for something, and the feeling that the horses give them.
Yeah.
You probably can't lay your finger on what it is that it's doing, but the feeling that it gives them just makes them want to be there.
I think that is. I think it is. I think it is you're outside, you're exercising, lifting a heavy bucket. I think you're socialising.
Yeah.
I think because you are then also getting tired, your sleep improves then, doesn't it? And because your sleep improves, it's easy to make better decisions with your diet. You know, I don't know about you, but when I'm tired, I'm having a chocolate bar. You know, but if I've got the energy and the discipline, I'll have a salad. Not too often, but you know what I mean?
It is about that feeling. I think we use a quote in our training that's probably my favourite quote about inclusion by the author Maya Angelou. And she says, you know, people forget what you did, people forget what you said, but people always remember how you made them feel. Yeah. And I think that kind of says it all. Really.
Yeah. And I think giving these kids this opportunity will probably make them into much better, not better human beings, but the human beings
they'll have the skills to manage the life that they've got ahead of them, because it's tough. You know, life is tough.
It's horrible
for a lot of people, whatever your circumstances and situation. So if we are able to offer those young people the chance to develop those skills, to give them a better chance at having that positive future in life, then, you know, we are immensely proud and privileged to be able to do that.
And as you should be. It's a great thing that you're doing, I think, and I really do hope it goes throughout the whole of the UK, and I hope you get out to those 400% 400 centres that are providing this in their community.
So we're not far off.
No. Well, hopefully we can hopefully try and help a little bit with it. But I really do. I think it's fantastic. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
And the work you're doing is phenomenal. So please keep going. Try not to sleep too much. Just keep doing it. But yeah, thank you again.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.